So very simple. Most of the startups failed during the product market fit. Now they failed because it took longer than what they expected. They spent more time than they expected during this period of time, or they spent more money than they expected, and they ran out of cash in the middle of product market fit phase. Now when this happens, you basically have in your story, you have a story with no proof, right? You have a team that is unable to deliver, and you are unable to raise additional capital. Or if you are able, then it's very, very expensive. So no product market fit, you die. Yesterday, someone was sitting here and asked me when to stop. You will stop if you die, right? You'll stop running out of cash, and this is it, right? Not because you want to, but because you were unable to get into product market fit. You were unable to demonstrate or prove your thesis about the value that you're generating to the users. Now, the way to get there is hard work. There is nothing else besides hard work. You are keep on iterating persistently and consistently, and you keep on measuring and you keep on fixing. You measure, you fix, you measure, you fix, you measure, you fix, all the time, iteration after iteration. And the faster that you are able to do those iterations, you simply learn faster. So assume that the number of iterations that you need to do is predetermined, right? Maybe it's 10, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 15, but it's predetermined. The faster that you are doing them, the faster that you are getting out of this phase of product market fit, and you get to the level that you do have a product that creates value. Now, usually, each one of these phases will take between 2 to 4 weeks. And if you need to do 15 of them, if it's 4 weeks, it's a year and a half. If it's 2 weeks, it's 9 months. You really want to be able to do that faster. And the most important part during this phase is that you build the culture and the organization to do those fast, and time after time after time. Learn, fix, go. Learn, fix, go. Learn, fix, go all the time. At the end of the day, the product manager, the PM, is measured by the ability to improve the funnel. Not about the slickness of the application, not about whether or not it's cool or not cool, not about anything else. The improvement of the funnel. To a certain extent, I would say this is a lot of the startups don't have a product manager for the first year. It's the role of the CEO to actually be responsible for the success of the product. If the CEO focus on the most important thing, this is the most important thing. Now, if the CEO is a pretty strong person, then there might not be a room for a product manager there. And so 2 options on day one, right? If you are the CEO, you would have to decide if you are going to focus on the product yourself, or you are going to allow enough room for a product manager to do the job. And you know yourself, so you would be able to make that decision. If you decide that you're going to bring a product manager, then you need to give them the space. If you decide that you're going to do it yourself, then do it yourself. You don't need a product manager then. Some of the things that we don't have during this phase, right? So big no's. No marketing, no business development, no monetization. If you try to do any of those on day one, you will simply defocus the efforts on product market fit. Now, essentially, when you come to think about it, then you start to ask yourself, okay, so why do I need business development? What exactly is the role of the business development at this phase? Now, it's possible that you have a marketplace and you need the inventory, then you do have a role for business development. Bring the inventory. Don't bring the inventory in the marketplace. Bring in the marketplace just the buyers and bring the inventory from the outside. So we had early stage business development at Waze. We tried to establish partnerships with fleet management companies that will bring us GPS data, that we would have traffic information earlier rather than later. and then we have value sooner rather than later. So the map may not be complete, but we already have traffic information. Or in some places we partner with map makers, local map makers, and we basically told them, give us your map and we will give you map updates, right? And sometimes it did work, sometimes it didn't. In a lot of cases, by the way, it didn't, right? Because so let me try that. So assume for a second I'm in 2010, and you, each one of you, is a company that have a map, a digital map, which is expensive asset, and you built that over the last 10 years, and you have your own mechanism of building that. And I'm showing up the door and I say, give me your map. And I would use that in my app, and I will give you map updates, right? And so the initial response will always going to be no, right? Because I already built mine and you have nothing. And then I would say something else. You know what? Look, if my model is right, in a couple of years, my map is going to be much better than yours, and you will be out of business. If my model is not right, and I will not have users, then why should you care? It doesn't matter. If we don't cooperate, you lose anyhow. If we do cooperate and I'm successful, then you win. And eventually we were able to actually get the map in a lot of places, or in some places, and we have used that in order to accelerate the period of time of not good enough. So if you require something else that is not users in your process, business development might help. But otherwise, if you think you're going to bring users through business development, you don't need them. You don't need a mass of users in this phase. You only need enough to collect the feedback. And so this is why you don't need marketing. And by the way, people sometimes telling me, but the product is not ready, so if I would launch that today, I'm going to lose all of my users. And then I ask them, how many users you have? Or how many users you're going to have? 72 users that you're going to lose? Lose them. There are billions out there. It's not a big deal. Now, it's against our nature, right? So our nature is basically saying we need to support our users at all cases. The support that we need at the beginning, we need the users to be the testers for us. We need them to help us to improve the product. Later on, we will need users to generate different things. In monetization, you cannot do initially. You simply cannot do initially. You don't have enough. You don't have enough of anything. And you would actually defocus yourself and go after the first one that will offer you a deal for money. And this is not necessarily what you're trying to do. So go to market. So obviously we mentioned yesterday that the first thing that we would like to do is starting in our own market. We're going to learn faster. We're going to have access to users. We're going to have feedbacks from users. We're going to ask our friends to actually try that, and not telling them what to do and how to use that, and then ask them how was the experience. So we're going to learn faster in product market fit in our own market. Whatever this is, a country or a city or a region or whatever it is, we're going to start at home. In the backyard, we're going to learn faster. The key question is, how long are we going to stay in our backyard? And where do we go next? And when do we go next? Because essentially, trying to make the growth based on in the backyard might be limited. Now, not all the time. I can give you an example that you don't need to go to other markets. So let's say for a second that you realize that there is a market failures around tax return in your country. And in fact, if I don't know if so in the US, everyone needs to file their return every year. Most countries, people don't file tax report every year. And if you don't, then most of the employees are actually entitled to get tax refund. In Israel, 80% of the people that do not file tax return are entitled to get a refund. I would suspect that this is the case in all the countries, because there are changes throughout the years that actually make you entitled to get a tax refund, right? For example, if you have a newborn this year, you're actually entitled to get tax refund this year. So a lot of the population, if you're going to build something here in Brazil, if you're going to build something in a different country, moving from one country to another country is not easy. It's not the same product. It's the same value proposition, but it's not the same product. And it might not be, sometimes it's not even doable. Right? So maybe you figure out different ways to actually make it simple for people to do that. In this simple approach only working here in Brazil, and it doesn't work in other countries, or you don't know in which other countries it doesn't work. Now, if this is 80% of the population, then that's actually quite a big market, right? So as you look all the employees, there are probably 120, 130 million employees in Brazil. 80% of them, it's 100 million people. It's a big market. Now, I don't really know the regulation. I looked at it in different countries, but not in Brazil. And this is something that it's possible that you don't move to another market because your market is big enough on one hand, and it's not the same product moving from one place to another place. We actually had the same issue with FIEGs when we moved from Israel to the US. It's not the same product. The value proposition is the same, right? So we will help you to figure out how much fees you are paying and how to reduce them. But the financial products are so different. Then the reality is that it's not even the same product. The user experience is not even the same. In Israel, we ask people to send us to scan the annual report and send it over. And in the US, we can actually automatically log into their account and figure out everything from there, right? So the user experience is very different. Here, you need to do something active. And here, you just need to provide us with the login credentials, and we automatically doing everything. And so even the user experience is different, not to mention the entire infrastructure of financial products that are different. So go-to-market objectives, really what we are trying to do, we need to bring users to prove growth, that we can actually grow. We need to prove maybe the business model. So we need enough users to actually demonstrate and improve on the business models. And we need to demonstrate our ability to actually have large numbers of people or growing or scaling in order to raise additional funds. Yes. So where do we go? Where do we start? Where do we go next? When, how, and what's the budget for that? The first market is very simple. It's home. This is where we can learn faster. This is where we can raise capital easily. By the way, if you think you can raise capital in the US, you can't. You can only raise capital initially. If you're a first-time entrepreneur, you can only raise capital in your home geography. You cannot raise capital in another country. Later on, you might be able to. If you demonstrate that there is a need and you're making expansions into different markets, then you can raise capital in the new market. But initially, you can't. You will have to raise capital in your hometown. And so we're raising capital. We keep on iteration until we figure out all the learnings that we can do. If there is pretty much nothing else that we can learn in the local market, then there are only only one reason why we would like to stay there. If the market is big enough business that it's worthwhile. Otherwise, we need to go someplace else. We need to go someplace else in order to support growth, in order to support globalization, in order to support the ability to raise additional capital. We will need to go someplace else. So we start today with the product, and the first market is only relevant as long as it keeps as long as we learn there faster. And maybe we already reached the product market fit level and we don't learn anything new, and we don't care. We simply don't care anymore about this market unless it's a big enough market, big enough business. The first market, the second market is the more interesting one. So we're looking for a significant market that is easy to win. Sometimes, think of a function of, okay, there is in this market, there is a big perception of the problem. In this market, the total addressable market is large. In this market, PR actually can help us, right? Because in the US, it doesn't. In the US, you will be spending $20,000 or $30,000 a month in getting a PR agency that will get you a couple of articles a month that no one cares, right? If you'll go to different countries, you might be spending $3,000 a month and get tens of articles every month, right? So you're looking for a country that PR can help you. And on the flip side, you're looking for places where user acquisition cost is low, and you're looking for places when there is no competition. So just imagine that if you're running into a market that there is fierce competition, your budget is going to compete against their budget in marketing, in creating attention, in user acquisition, in everything. Now, they are probably local, and they have raised capital there, and so they probably have more than you do. If you go into those markets that the perception of the problem is big, that PR works, that the addressable market is big enough, and that there is no competition there, and user acquisition is inexpensive, you are likely to win. If you're going to a market where there is fierce competition there, and user acquisition is expensive, and PR doesn't work, and it's an important market, right? Because it's big enough, the perception of the problem is big, and the addressable market is big. So it's an important market, but you are likely to lose. So figure out a market that is easy to win. In other words, you're looking for something in the G20 countries, right? So top 20 economies. I mentioned yesterday, if you're starting here in Brazil, and you ask yourself, what is the next market? So the easiest next market, you start here in Porto Alegre, you go to São Paulo. So you start on day one, the days that you're still dreaming by yourself about the product, you start to telling yourself and explaining yourself which markets you're going to go next. You de facto starting to plan when you are approaching product market fit. When you're seeing the improvement and you tell yourself, you know what, in a few more iterations are going to be good enough, this is where you're starting to plan which one is the next market. And you go there as soon as your product is ready. So going back for a second for product development, and I would use the analogy of building an app, right? It's not necessarily building an app. We might be building something that is completely different. iPhone users, raise your hand for a second. Android users, raise your hand for a second. Where do we start? Which product? iPhones or Android? So the answer is actually the natural answer would be the one that the founder has, which is the wrong one. The real answer is iPhone first. Developing on Android is much more complex. A year from now, when the product is ready, you will find out that you have X numbers in the team of developers for iPhones and 3X on the team of Android. And so initially, you only build the product for iPhone because it's easier. It doesn't sound like that because it takes longer to actually get the approval of the store, but the development cycles are easier. You start on iPhone, and after the product is becoming good enough or nearly good enough, only then you build the Android version for that. Otherwise, you will have two versions, keep on doing iteration after iteration on both of them, and this one costs you 3 times more. So I've seen that before. I heard that before. It is right that you can do faster iterations on a specific version on the Android, right? So you upload that to the store, and you get here's how it works, right? You upload the first version on the iPhone to the store, and then you get an email that tells you, okay, we are going to review that, and as soon as it's being reviewed, we will approve that. And it might take days, right? A couple of days. Sometimes if it's the first version, maybe even a week. And on Android, it's the same process. You upload that to the store, you get an email, we're going to review that and approve that, but if you go to the store, it's already there. And so you're right, it takes seconds to do that. At the same time, I would say, what exactly is the big deal that the version is out there with a bug? You have very few users, right? It's not a big deal. The reality is that with Android, you need to support multiple screen sizes, multiple versions of the operating system, multiple phones that some of them are not exactly the way that you think. And the result is that you will end up with 3 times more people developing for Android than there are for iPhones. And so for me, I would say the fact that you go out with a bug, it's not a big deal. And so it will take 2 days to fix that. 2 years, it's a problem. 2 days to fix that. And so still my approach would be iPhone first. Most of the developers, they don't like iPhone first because of that, because it will take them 2 days to get the approval. So going back into that, we start to think about the next market the day that we start the company. Building a plan for the next market as soon as we are approaching the good enough level of product market fit. And the day that we are good enough, we go to the next market. Now, the one person that leads to going to the next market is the CEO. In general, the CEO, she is responsible for doing everything for the first time. And after she will figure out how exactly to do that, only then we can bring people in and tell them this is how you're going to do that in the next country, or in the next business development, or in the next whatever. So the first thing, the CEO, she is responsible of doing that. And okay, so when product market fit is good enough, there are no more critical learnings that we can do on the local market. So product is good enough. We can keep on improving, but it doesn't matter anymore. Sometimes current market is not large enough. If the current market is large enough, then you can stay longer. And you have enough funding for this period of time. So if you think of go to market into a new market, I would need to demonstrate my ability for product market fit in the new market. I would need 9 months or 6 months or whatever. Then I need to have enough funding for this phase, because otherwise, and this is in general, we don't want to run out of cash in the middle of a phase, because then we are actually falling back into the previous phase in terms of what we have proved so far. Usually people, as a rule of thumb, so forget for a second the starting of the startup, so not day one, but after a year, 70% of the expenses is the paychecks, right? So you build a budget that looks like that. Year 1, year 2, so forth. Over here. Year 1, year 2, so forth. And then we have R&D, product, marketing, support, and so forth. And then essentially what you really have here is how many people do you need. So and you split that into Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and you say, okay, initially I need 1 server developers and 1 iPhone developers. This is going to be 2 people, right? And do I need a product manager? No, I'm going to do that myself. So G&A is going to be here. So I don't need anyone here. Marketing, we said we don't need, right? So nothing here. Support, maybe we need 1 person because we are not going to build the server side on day 1, right? So let's say that the server side actually needs to, you're going to scan receipts, and we need an OCR to deal with that and automatically build that. And I'm saying, you know what, I'm going to have maybe 100 new users a month, and I'm going to have 100 receipts a month. I'm going to bring someone to do that under support and not build that on the server on day 1. I'll figure that out later. In G&A, there is CEO and maybe office manager or CFO or someone that is doing the rest of the stuff. Okay, this is it, right? In Q2, we actually need another person here, and the rest remains the same. And here, we are starting to have another person and 1 product and so forth. And we fill up how many people we need in terms of estimating how much we need. Now, in reality, you build that on day 1. It has nothing to do with the reality. You build it very lean, right? Very, very lean. Maybe you say to yourself, you know what, I will deal with office stuff, whatever it is, right? And over time, you realize what you really need. So then you realize that I actually need another person here on the R&D and so forth. And this is your budget. Now you calculate base. Initially, I would say if your company is not funded, then you pay very low salary. If market is X, you might be paying less than half than X. So give them options, bring them based on your friendship and dreams and everything else, but you do not pay them a lot of money. Once you raise capital, you might saying, I will be paying less than market, right? So if software engineer in the market is getting $2,000 a month here in Brazil, and you basically say, you know what, I'm going to pay them $1,500 or $1,000, much less than market. And you basically say, over time, once we raise additional capital, we will increase the salaries. So here's what you do, right? And obviously, this budget is about supporting the plan that you have, right? So product market fit is going to be here, right? So after 15 months, Q1 here, we're gonna have product market fit, right? So the numbers that you have are probably right. The only thing that you would do is you would say, you know what, I'm gonna move that by 2 quarters. So it's gonna be actually after Q3 that I have product market fit. And this is the additional money that you need. Now, if you see that de facto you're moving faster, then it's okay. If you're moving slower, then you start to cut down things here. Then you basically say, I don't need this new thing that I thought I would need another marketing guy. It's not here. I'm going to push that further down the road. And so you update the budget. You update based on the reality. And the reality is how much progress you are making on the different phases that you are in. So, the bad news is that they're only 100%. This is it, right? You cannot give more than that.
But how much are you retaining for yourself and how much are you splitting?
So it's up to you to decide. In general, in a more mature market, there are tables that basically say the same way that a software engineer budget with X years of experience is getting this and this and this salary. They're also getting this and this and this amount of options in different phases. And so in general rule, I would say after A round, right? Then you would have sort of a table that says, okay, engineers with 1 to 5 years, engineers with 6 and more, VP, and different types of positions, and how many options you're going to give them. So maybe that will be 0.5%, and that will be 0.75%, and that will be 2%, right? And if this one is lower than that, then maybe 0.25%. So that will be probably the order of magnitude, or at least in Israel that will be the order of magnitude. Now, if you are before a round, then you give them more because you ask them to give up on parts of the salary. So you might be doubling that. If this is way before that you're not paying them money, then you might be even tripling that. And
we're talking about tripling that 5 to 6% for a VP.
How many VPs do you need?
Okay, one, but wait.
Maybe one. Most likely, this is actually the co-founder of yours, right? So the technology lead is the co-founder of the CEO, and this is it, right? So you don't have VPs at the beginning. You don't need. And so you
talking about 10% before.
Probably. That's the order of magnitude. And if you build a strong team of people and you run with them a long period of time with no pay, then maybe it's 15%. Maybe it's even 20%. But that's the order of magnitude.
Never thought of it.
It's not huge number because you don't have a lot of people. Look at this organization, right? So this is After 3 quarters, we have 5, maybe here too, right? 9 people. This is it. And you figure out, okay, I have 4 engineers. One of them is maybe a co-founder. One of them is a VP, so 2%, and maybe 3 more here, so 5% all the R&D organization. This is it. Over time, you really would like to add more and more and more. So this is a very powerful tool to keep people that you want and give them more options. You can always do that. Okay, so that was a quick budget. The thinking now at the end of the day, you then tell yourself, okay, you know what? These are engineers. The average pay is X, and you convert that budget of people into budget of money. And if this is 70% of the expenses, then it's very easy to figure out how much the rest of the expenses are. Now you can build them into the budget. So I'm going to spend so and so on user acquisition, and I need operation and office and servers in Amazon and different things. Eventually you'll build that. But to do the rough estimation, you don't need that. Now, most of the startups would look like that on the first year. So maybe 4 or 5 engineers, this is it. And the rest of the functions, maybe support, and pretty much this is it. No other functions are actually needed. Okay, so what else do we have here? So going into the new market. It's a journey by itself. We have a lot of learnings that we have done on the first market, and we can figure out what works and what doesn't work. And most of the times, we are starting there with a product that is already good enough in the origin market. So the journey might be faster. But what is more important is that the learning of the new market, so we can go ahead and duplicate that to other new markets, right? So as soon as we finishing up writing the cookbook of going to a new market, then we would like to bring someone on board with a go-to-market position or go-to-market objectives and tell them, okay, this is the cookbook, now go to the next market and to the next market and to the next market. During this journey of a new market, we will start to explore business development. So now we are looking for business developments to bring us users. Right? At the beginning, we don't need users. In product market fit, we don't care about how many users we have. When we are going into a new market, we want new users. We know that the product in general is already good enough. So we might need to do some fine-tuning of the product to make it good enough in the new country. But we are really looking to bring users. So we will need business development. We will need local support in different language maybe. So if we are here and we are going to Portugal, then maybe we don't need different language. But if we are going to a different country, we need different languages. We need different nuances that we will need support. Marketing and business development starting to become relevant, and they become essentially part of the cookbook. Now, the first market, we don't know which part of that is going to work, right? So we start to imagine that maybe we will cooperate with department stores that will help us. So we go and try to do business development with them, and they say no. And so we figure out, okay, this one doesn't work. And then we try with mobile operator, and then we try with anyone that actually do have users. So maybe insurance companies, maybe whomever, right? Because we really want users. And so we want to partner, we want to establish business development relationship with someone that can bring us the users. If they cannot bring us the users, then they're not going to help us, not in this phase. Usually we ask ourselves, so if they're going to bring us users, what exactly are we going to give them? Opportunity to make money. That's what we're going to give them. Usually 18-month journey until we actually complete the cookbook. Obviously we will go. So this is the time to do the break. Okay, then.